Okay, so this is a good thing then to talk about, and it's sort of going to be the theme for the year. I don't have it all planned out at the moment, but the overall theme for the General Marian formation this year will be the Year of Faith, and I'll work Our Lady, of course, into it. But today I want to talk about what the Year of Faith is and why we're celebrating it and its overall meaning. It'll be from October 11th, 2012 to November 24th, 2013, and I'll explain the reason why in a moment. But the Holy Father promulgated an apostolic letter. Motu Proprio data simply means on his own authority, because he's a pope. He just decided to do this, and he wrote this apostolic letter, which he published on October 11th, 2011, last year. Okay, so the Year of Faith doesn't actually start until October 11th, 2012. So he wrote this apostolic letter and promulgated it a year before the Year of Faith actually begins, so that we have time to prepare for the Year of Faith. All right, so I said it begins on October 11th, 2012, and it ends on November 24th, 2013. Because November 24th is the last Sunday of Ordinary Time in 2013, the Feast of Christ the King. All right, so that will be the Year of Faith. Why October 11th, 2011? Well, we'll discover that in a moment. But Porta Fidei means the door of faith. So the apostolic letter by which he announces this Year of Faith is called Porta Fidei, the door of faith. So what I'm going to do now, in the first half, if we have time to have for the second half, I don't know, but the first half of this will be to look at the beginning of the apostolic letter, the first five sections of the apostolic letter. It's considerably longer. It's not very long. It's not a really long document. But we're going to look at part of it. And you can get it online. So if you go to the Vatican website, you can get the apostolic letter and download it. If you Google it, it'll be the first hit will be the Vatican webpage that has the apostolic letter on it. There's another document as well, which I'll talk about briefly maybe today. But that's a document from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith called, I think it says, Note on Pastoral Recommendations for the Year of Faith. And that was promulgated, I think, on January 6th of this year. So you have the apostolic letter, and then you have the note from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. They're two different things. So if you Google it, you may get the note. Just remember that Porta Fidei is the most important document, which is from the Pope himself. This is the first paragraph of the document. The door of faith is always open for us, ushering us into the life of communion with God and offering entry into His Church. It is possible to cross that threshold when the Word of God is proclaimed and the heart allows itself to be shaped by transforming grace. So you're going to see this throughout this document, and you need to understand it as being the focus of the Pope's attention as he calls for this Year of Faith and as he tries to affect the Church in a positive way, to affect each member of the Church in a positive way in this Year of Faith. The goal really is when the Word of God is proclaimed and the heart allows itself to be shaped by transforming grace. In the end, the act of faith is a free act. You know, the Church can proclaim the truth all she wants, but unless we correspond as a free act of faith, as a deliberate choice on our part, nothing happens. All right? The Church teaches, we have to accept the teaching and correspond to it, obviously. But maybe to some it's not that obvious. To enter through that door, the door of faith, is to set out on a journey that lasts a lifetime. So the doorway is faith, but we have to go through it. We have to open the door and go through. This is the point that the Pope is making. It's a free act. It's something that we have to correspond to. It begins with baptism, through which we can address God as Father, and it ends with the passage through death to eternal life, fruit of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, whose will it was, by the gift of the Holy Spirit, to draw those who believe in him into his own glory. To profess faith in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is to believe in one God who is love, the Father who is who in the fullness of time sent his Son for our salvation, Jesus Christ, who is the mystery, who in the mystery of his death and resurrection redeemed the world, the Holy Spirit, who leads the Church across the centuries as we await the Lord's glorious return. So, faith in the Blessed Trinity, the fundamental of our creed. You know, the creed is Trinitarian. I believe in God the Father, I believe in the Son, I believe in the Holy Spirit. So, the whole of the faith is contained here, but the point of the Holy Father is that we have to do this ourselves. Not by ourselves, but he's encouraging us to pass through the door and to live it with all our hearts. And I haven't said, why are we doing this? Why is the Holy Father doing this? I'm going to let him get to the point, in his own way. So, rediscovering the journey of faith. Ever since the start of my ministry as the successor of Peter, I have spoken of the need to rediscover the journey of faith so as to shed ever clearer light on the joy and renewed enthusiasm of the encounter with Christ. So, the Pope is asking the modern world, especially those who already profess the faith, to rediscover it, to be renewed in the faith at this particular moment. And you got to remember, as Pope, the Holy Father is not only the supreme teacher of the faith, but he's also the supreme pastor, the shepherd, the one who leads us at this particular moment. So the deposit of faith is the same from the time of our Lord until the end of time. But each particular generation encounters new challenges to living the faith. So the Holy Father is calling for this year of faith at this particular moment. He says it's necessary at this particular moment. At this particular moment, we need this renewed enthusiasm. We need to rediscover the journey of faith. During the homily at the Mass marking the inauguration of my pontificate, I said, the Church as a whole and all of her pastors, like Christ, must set out to lead people out of the desert towards the place of life, towards friendship with the Son of God, towards the one who gives life and life in abundance. It often happens that Christians are more concerned for the social, cultural, and political consequences of their commitment, continue to think of the faith as a self-evident presupposition for life in society. It may have been true at one time in a Christian society that the principles of the faith were presumed to be true, that life was considered sacred, human life was considered sacred no matter what stage, that marriage was presumed to be a union of a man and a woman. It's no longer the case. And we're trying to profess our faith in that kind of climate. In reality, not only can this presupposition no longer be taken for granted, but it is often openly denied, whereas in the past it was possible to recognize a unitary cultural matrix. What is he saying there? There was, in the past, one cultural matrix for society, at least in the West: Christianity. Christianity is what united society. Christian culture is what gave unity to all the various nations of Western society. That's no longer the case. Broadly accepted in its appeal to the content of faith and the values inspiring it. Today, this no longer seems to be the case in large swaths of society because of a profound crisis of faith that has affected many people. So, bottom line is, the Holy Father is calling for a year of faith in the face of a crisis of faith. But If you notice the tenor of what the Holy Father is saying, it's not a desperate call. All right? The Holy Father is not couching this call for a year of faith in desperate or primarily negative terms. He speaks in hopeful terms and in positive terms, not primarily in negative terms, not primarily in reference to the crisis, but primarily in reference to the power of Christ who has given us the faith. And the faith has the power to transform. We cannot accept that salt should become tasteless or the light be kept hidden. The people of today can still experience the need to go to the well, like the Samaritan woman, in order to hear Jesus, who invites us to believe in him and to draw upon the source of living water welling up within him. You know, our Lord uses the analogy of salt and light in terms of our own profession of faith, our own willingness to profess and live the faith for the welfare of other people. All right, so again, the Holy Father is talking about the free and personal profession of our faith in this period of crisis as being particularly important for those who do not believe. You know, what is it that's going to change the course of this crisis, which consists of people who don't believe? They don't believe, they believe in falsehoods. What's going to change the course of this? Of course, it's God's grace, but it's going to be God's grace shining through those who do believe already. It's going to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world that's radiated through those who freely and personally believe in Christ. We must rediscover a taste for feeding ourselves on the Word of God, faithfully handed down by the Church, and on the bread of life offered as sustenance for His disciples. Indeed, the teaching of Jesus still resounds in our day with the same power. So, again, the Holy Father is talking in positive terms. There's a lot of bad things, there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of falsehood, but we are not living in the darkness. We are living in the light of Christ. And the light of Christ is still more powerful than the darkness. You know, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. That's in the beginning, but it's also at every age of the Christian era, and it's also true today. The darkness does not overcome the light. Indeed, the teaching of Jesus still resounds in our day with the same power. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life. The question posed by his listeners is the same that we ask today. What must we do to be doing the works of God? We know Jesus' reply. This is the work of God. This is the Opus Dei, that you believe in Him who He has sent. The work of God is to believe in Jesus Christ. If we truly believe, if we believe with our whole heart and mind, then we are doing God's work. And the light of Christ will shine through us to our brothers and sisters who are living in darkness. Belief in Jesus Christ, then, is the way to arrive definitively at salvation. In the light of this, I have decided to announce a year of faith. It will begin on October 11th, 2012. This is why, the date. The 50th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council. All right? So on October 11th, 2012 was the official opening date of the Second Vatican Council 50 years ago. What did I say? 2012 would have been, whatever, 1962. All right? So it's 50th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council. And it will end on the solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, Universal King, on 24 November 2013. The starting date of October 11, 2012 also marks the 20th anniversary of the publication of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. That's a secondary reason. Primary reason, 50th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council. Secondary reason, 20th anniversary of the promulgation of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. A text promulgated by my predecessor, John Paul II, with a view to illustrating for all the faithful the power and the beauty of the faith. All right? The power and the beauty of the faith. Illustrating for all the faithful the power and the beauty of the faith. The faith is powerful. The faith is beautiful. The faith has the possibility, has the power, the capability of transforming society. All right. This is harder to read. A little bit smaller, longer paragraph. This is important. This sort of gets to the core of what I've been emphasizing: the personal and the personal character of the profession of faith. In some respects, my venerable predecessor, that's Blessed Pope John Paul, saw this year as a consequence. Wait a second. I've left something out here. He talks about, this is not John Paul, this is Paul VI. He talks about how in 1967, Paul VI called a year of faith. It was the centenary of the martyrdoms of St. Peter and Paul. And so he called this year of faith. And so he's quoting here, in this first part, he's quoting Paul VI, not John Paul II. Later on down here, he quotes John Paul II. He makes that clear. But here he's quoting Paul VI, what he said about the year of faith in 1967. In some respects, my venerable predecessor saw this year as a, quote, consequence and a necessity of the post-conciliar period. All right? Fully conscious of the grave difficulties of the time, especially with regard to the profession of the true faith and its correct interpretation. So after the Council, there has been characteristic over the last 50 years, a time of grave difficulty, especially with regard to the profession of the true faith and its correct interpretation. This has been our experience. It seemed to me that timing the launch of the Year of Faith to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the opening of the Second Vatican Council would provide a good opportunity to help people understand that the texts bequeathed by the Council Fathers, in the words of Blessed John Paul II, quote, this is John Paul, have lost nothing of their value or brilliance. They need to be read correctly, to be widely known, and taken to heart as important and normative texts of the magisterium within the Church's tradition. I feel more than ever in duty bound to point to the Council as the great grace bestowed on the Church in the 20th century. There we find a sure compass by which to take our bearings in the century now beginning. That's end quote of John Paul. Then Pope Benedict goes on, I would also like to emphasize strongly what I had occasion to say concerning the Council a few months after my election as the successor of St. Peter. If we interpret and implement it, meaning the Council, guided by the right hermeneutic, it can be and become increasingly powerful for the ever necessary renewal of the Church. Okay, hermeneutic, it's a fancy Greek word which means interpretation. It's a principle of interpretation. All right? So what's the principle by which you come to understand the Second Vatican Council? That's the hermeneutic. All right? Fancy word, it simply means basically interpretation or key to the interpretation. It's the key to the interpretation of the Council. Let me read that again. He wants to emphasize what he had said shortly after he became the Pope. If we interpret and implement the Council guided by the right hermeneutic, it can be and can become increasingly powerful for the ever necessary renewal of the Church. Now, the Pope here is quoting an address that he gave to the Roman Curia Every year the Pope gives a Christmas address to all the members of the Curia, all the members of the Holy See, all the cardinals and bishops and monsignors and priests that belong to the various congregations, or what they call dicasteries of the Holy See, all the various organs of the Holy See. Every year the Pope gives them a Christmas address. All right? In 2005, on December 22nd, he gave that year's Christmas address. And it was the address in which he talked about the correct interpretation of the Second Vatican Council. If you want to understand Benedict XVI's thought on the Church and where she should be going at this point in time, you have to read this address. December 22nd, 2005. It was given how many months? 4 months, 5 months after he became Pope. It's where he talks about the hermeneutic of continuity. Who's heard that before? Hermeneutic of continuity. Hermeneutic of continuity and reform, he talks about. This is where he talks about it. If you want to understand what the Holy Father thinks about the Second Vatican Council, you need to read December 22nd, 2005. Google Benedict XVI, December 22nd, 2005. It'll be the first hit off the Vatican website. You could hardly read anything more important coming out from Benedict, because it will help you understand everything else. So he brings it up here. You know, we need to interpret the Council according to the right hermeneutic, which in this discourse of 2005, he talks about it as the hermeneutic of continuity. Simply means that in order to interpret the Council properly, you have to consider it as part of the tradition of the Church, and that it doesn't change the tradition. All right. In that conference, he talks about how the opposite of the hermeneutic of continuity is the hermeneutic of discontinuity or rupture. And this interpretation basically says that the Council was kind of a constitutional convention in which the Church redefined herself. All right? Changed the nature of the Church. But that the documents of the Second Vatican Council were the remote results of compromises. All right, so you had left-wing bishops and you had right-wing bishops. You had conservative bishops and liberal bishops. You had progressive bishops and orthodox bishops. And they came together and they fought it out, and they kind of came up with a compromise. And the documents are ambiguous because they were the result of a compromise. This is where you get the spirit of Vatican II. You've all heard about the spirit of Vatican II. Well, the spirit of Vatican II is this idea that the texts of Vatican II were the result of a compromise. So you have to read between the lines. All right? You have to read between the lines. And you have to think about the fact that the real goal was to veer off in this new direction. All right? To rupture from the past. To break off from the past. That was the real goal. But in the end, the progressive bishops were not able to get their way, so they compromised. So what you have to do is you have to read the Council according to its spirit, not according to the text, because the real idea was to break off. And the texts don't fully reflect that. All right? But you have to also realize that this rupturist interpretation of the Council is not only held by the progressives, the modernists, it's also held by the traditionalists. They also believe that the goal of the Council was to break off. All right? And that's why they reject it. All right? So the modernists think that the Council was going off to the left, but it didn't go far enough. So you have to read between the lines to figure out what the Council is saying. The traditionalists also believe that, but they believe that it went too far, that it was really a rupture with tradition. The Holy Father is saying this is a false interpretation of the Council. Council is not a rupture with tradition. It's not a rupture with tradition. All right? And that is an underlying presumption of the Holy Father as he calls this year of faith. And I will try to illustrate why the point I just made is very important. I should also say, I thought I had it here, but apparently I don't. Yeah, here. This is it. My venerable predecessor, the servant of God, Paul VI, announced one in 1967 to commemorate the martyrdom of Saints Peter and Paul on the 9th centenary of the Supreme Act of Witness. You know what? If I go back here, that first quote might be John Paul. I just for your information, you can look it up yourself. But this is definitely Paul VI. To commemorate the martyrdom of Saints Peter and Paul, the 19th centenary of their Supreme Act of Witness, he thought of it as a solemn moment for the whole Church to make, this is very important, an authentic and sincere profession of the same faith. Moreover, he wanted this to be confirmed in a way that was individual and collective, personal and communal, free and conscious, inward and outward, humble and frank. He thought that in this way the whole Church could reappropriate exact knowledge of the faith so as to reinvigorate it, purify it, confirm it, and confess it. This is the point. This is the way why the council was called. We're living in a modern age, not in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages are gone. As much as you'd like to think that we could have them again, we're not going to have them again. We live at a time in which the principles of the faith are not the principles on which society are based. And that the structures of society, of the society in which we live, do not support our beliefs any longer. And while it might be nice if they did, and to some extent, to a large extent, we fight for that in terms of fighting for the civil recognition of the natural law, right? Marriage, life, all these things. We live in a time in which it becomes increasingly more important that the conversion and sanctification of others depends upon not the structures of society, but upon the convictions of individuals. The society is going to be transformed primarily, the Holy Father is saying, not through the structures, because the structures don't support us, and there's no guarantee that they will. We continue to fight for that. But as long as they don't, the transformation of society is going to depend upon the faith of individual persons, their personal conviction, their personal act of faith, their personal authentic and sincere profession of the same faith, individual and collective, free and conscious, inward and outward, humble and frank. All right? The great upheavals of that year, 1967, made even more evident the need for a celebration of this kind. It concluded with the Credo of the people of God. You can read that too. Paul VI, very beautiful reprisal of the faith in terms of not a liturgical credo like we recite the Nicene Creed at every Mass, but a creed that Paul VI wrote based on the same structure, intended to show how much the essential content that for centuries has formed the heritage of all believers needs to be confirmed, understood, and explored ever anew so as to bear consistent witness in historical circumstances very different from those in the past. We've got 10 minutes. I don't know if I'll have time to do this. I'll try. But what I want to do now is give you kind of a historical background for the Year of Faith. Historical background which would begin basically with that 2005 conference that the Holy Father gave to the Roman Curia, to give you an idea of what the Holy Father is trying to do. And you're going to see that the Holy Father is going in one way two lines of the development, and the rupturists, those who hold to the hermeneutic of rupture, are going in an opposite direction. And I think I can illustrate to you why the Holy Father has deemed that this year of faith is so important. So here's the timeline. All right, I'll just skip that part. So December 22nd, 2005, he gives this address to the Roman Curia. The Holy Father strongly reaffirms the wisdom of the Council and its direction, upholding the need for the dialogue between reason and faith on the basis of the Second Vatican Council. He goes on to say, this dialogue must now be developed with great open-mindedness, but also with that clear discernment that the world rightly expects of us in this very important moment. Thus today, we can look with gratitude to the Second Vatican Council if we interpret and implement it, guided by the right hermeneutic, etc., etc. What he quoted in Porta Fidei. He's saying that the dialogue between the Church and the world, between faith and reason, can continue fruitfully if we interpret the Council rightly. But the Council, the Second Vatican Council, is the key, if it's interpreted correctly. All right. That's the first thing. That was December 22nd, 2005. The second thing, July 7th, 2007. This is the Apostolic letter of Pope Benedict Summorum Pontificum, which concerns the use of the Roman liturgy as it existed before 1970, meaning the old Missal of Pius V, so-called Tridentine Rite. So it mandated the free use of the old Missal as the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite. So the Holy Father does not talk about the traditional Rite and the new Mass, or the Vetus Ordo. They do use Vetus Ordo, which means old Rite, old order, and Novus Ordo, new order. But primarily the terms he uses is ordinary form and extraordinary form. Ordinary form is the Rite of Paul VI, the English Mass, or the Novus Ordo, the Mass that most of us attend. And the other one, the extraordinary form, is the old Missal. And the Holy Father says expressly that his purpose was to respond to the insistent prayers of those who adhered and continue to adhere with great love and affection to the early liturgical reforms. In the letter accompanying the Motu Proprio, the Holy Father also expresses his hope that the biformity, the two forms, ordinary and extraordinary, would be mutually enriching. All right? So you go to the old Mass, you see the Mass of the ages, you see the reverence and holiness, and hopefully that experience will help priests and faithful to participate and celebrate the new order of the Mass more reverently and correctly. Likewise, I've heard priests say that one of the ways in which the new order of the Mass enriches the old form is that the new order of the Mass, when it's celebrated the way it's supposed to be celebrated, I'm not talking about abusing the rubrics, in the old Mass, there were those things called defects in the Mass. There was a whole section in the first part of the Missal about defects. What do you do if this happens? What do you do if you forget to say, the words before the institution or whatever? What happens? What do you do? Is it a grave sin? Is it a venial sin if you make mistakes? This type of thing. Something every priest had to learn. It had a good effect to keep the Mass celebrated reverently. It also made some priests very scrupulous. In fact, there's a thing called the scruple spoon. You ever seen the scruple spoon? Scruple spoon is a little tiny spoon, little tiny ladle that the priests would use, some priests would use, to take water out of the cruet and put it in the wine, to make sure that they didn't put too much water in the wine. And it is really a scruple spoon. It's a good way to do it. You don't put, because I'd put too much water in, and I'd have to go back and put wine in, because you can't dilute the wine so much that it becomes no longer wine, because if you do, it's invalid. But it's really not that difficult. And it's really not a matter of measuring out drops and stuff like that. But priests could do that. Well, some of that is overcome by the way that the new Mass is celebrated. The old Mass was not meant to be celebrated with a kind of rubrical rigidity like that. And some of that needs to be overcome. So anyway, that's the Motu Proprio is a very good thing. The biformity is a very good thing. Ultimately, we're going to return, one would presume, to uniformity of some sort. But that's the work of the Church and the Holy Father. January 21st, 2009, Pope Benedict lifts the excommunication of the four societies of St. Pius X bishops. All right? The ones that were consecrated illegally by Archbishop Lefebvre in 1988. This is not news to anyone, I presume. All right? And he says this: the remission of the excommunication was a measure taken in the field of ecclesiastical discipline. The individuals were freed from the burden of conscience constituted by the most serious ecclesiastical penalties. This disciplinary level needs to be distinguished from the doctrinal level. The fact that the Society of St. Pius X does not possess the canonical status in the Church is not, in the end, based on disciplinary but doctrinal reasons. So they're no longer excommunicated, but they're not regular either, because they have doctrinal issues. All right? They're not excommunicated, but they're not in good standing either. And the Pope put them in this sort of limbo position, this sort of middle position, because he's trying to bring them back. I'm going to lift the excommunications, all right? So you're no longer under penalty of canon law because of the irregularity. But that doesn't mean that, for example, that you can go just wander down and go to the Society of St. Pius X Masses, that they're in good standing. They don't have a ministry in the Church. They don't have jurisdiction. The bishops don't have jurisdiction. The priests don't have jurisdiction. Just the way it is. All right. So, let's follow this for a second. You get the hermeneutic continuity, the Motu Proprio, the lifting of the excommunication. Then in 2009, Monsignor Brunero Gherardini publishes his book, The Ecumenical Vatican Council II, a much-needed discussion. And he also publishes an open letter to the Holy Father. All right? He and 82 other theologians, most of them Italians, signed a letter which they sent to the Holy Father, but they published it in a book. They also published it on the internet. All right? And they're calling the Holy Father to have this sort of grand examination of the council, to call a whole bunch of theologians and bishops to Rome and to re-examine the Second Ecumenical Council, all right? And to determine whether or not the Ecumenical Council is in continuity with tradition or not, all right? So, point this out. In 2005, the Pope says, to interpret the Council correctly, you must use the principle of continuity, right? Clearly. He says that clearly. Gherardini says, wait a second, I know that's what you said, but you haven't demonstrated it yet, right? So I know you're saying that the Council is in continuity with tradition, but I don't think so, all right? I'm willing to believe it if you demonstrate it. It's not enough to declare it. You have to demonstrate it. This is what Monsignor Gherardini is saying to the Pope, all right? And he published this openly and says, we want you to, what we're suggesting is that you call together a big synod, something, I don't know what you would call it, where we can have all these theologians, these scientific theologians there to examine the council, to take it apart piece by piece, and we can determine whether or not it's in continuity or not. We can determine what's fallible, what's infallible, what we have to hold, what we don't have to hold, etc., etc. This last sentence is very important. This is me, not Indy, but that's me. Gherardini effectively subordinates the magisterium of the Pope to a committee of scientific theologians. We will believe what you're saying, but you have to demonstrate it to us. That's all we're asking. You just demonstrate it to us. So the theologian is saying to the Pope, show me. Okay? Now, you see, so we have the hermeneutic of continuity, the motu proprio, the lifting of the excommunication, and now there are theologians who are saying, well, this is great. So now let's take the opportunity to challenge the Pope on the Council. The Pope is already making concessions, so let's push it a bit further. Let's put a little pressure on. This man is an academic. This priest is an academic, right? But what he did in this letter was politics, right? It's one thing for a theologian to say, this is what I think, and submit it to the Holy Father, or to say things in the context of academia, right? He's a scholar, he's a theologian, he's thinking things through, so he does it in the context of the university, or he does it in such a way as to present his findings, his thoughts to the Holy Father. But that's not what he does. What he does is to write a letter in the second person, addressing the Holy Father directly as you, and then he publishes it on the internet. That's not academics, that's politics. That's 2009. Then April 2011, at a conference in Rome, I have that sentence mixed up. Certain theologians, Gherardini, historian Roberto de Mattei, set off a firestorm of controversy by basically calling into question the hermeneutic of continuity. They're saying to the Holy Father, show me, we don't think so. Maybe, but we don't think so, show me. And then in the L'Osservatore Romano, which is the semi-official newspaper of the Vatican, there are bishops and other theologians that come out and challenge Gherardini and Roberto de Mattei. That was in April of 2011. It continues down to this time. There's a big controversy in Italy among theologians about the council now, whether or not it's in continuity with tradition or not. Anybody familiar with this?
Where do they stand? Are they concerned? What is their position?
Both Gherardini and Roberto de Mattei publicly are sympathetic with the Society of St. Pius X. Publicly support of the Society of St. Pius X. All right? So they directly challenge what the Holy Father said in 2005. And maybe you're not aware of it, but I think you'll probably become more aware of it, because more and more you'll see, for example, on, basically, I don't know what you'd say, Orthodox, Catholic websites, not traditionalists, not SSPX, but, like just regular Orthodox, Catholic, conservative, whatever you want to call it, Catholic websites are becoming more and more sympathetic with the Society of St. Pius X. Yeah, I think they have a point about the council. There's something wrong. Something's not right with the council. Yes?
In 2005, did the Holy Father do more than just declare it? Did he explain that?
Yes, he did.
Oh, okay.
Not to their satisfaction by any means, but he talks about why the Church, for example, revised its position on the relationship of the Church and the state. Why, for example, the Church taught what she did in the Second Vatican Council on religious liberty. And why the changes, he said there is real discontinuity, but it's discontinuity and continuity. It's what changed was not the principles of the faith. What changed was society and the need to adapt those principles to the society in which we live now. This is why the Second Vatican Council is a pastoral council. What does that mean? Gherardini would say it means it's not infallible. That's what he would say. It's not a dogmatic council, it's a pastoral council, therefore it's not infallible. But that's not what pastoral means. Pastoral means having to do with the shepherd, right? It's the role of the Pope not only to teach, it's the role of the Pope also to guide. That's his job, to guide the church. The Pope is not someone that you keep in the closet until you need him to define a dogma. The Pope is the one who runs the church. He's the supreme teacher. Yes, he's also the supreme pastor, which means it's his role to say, this is the way things need to be done now. This is the way the principles of the faith need to be applied to the modern world. That's his job. That's his job. So, and it's not his job necessarily to demonstrate. He can, but it is sufficient for him to say, this is the way it is. He's the pastor. And in the last analysis, Gherardini has it wrong. In order for us to believe in something to be true as a matter of faith or as a matter of what we should be doing today, it doesn't have to be proven. The papal magisterium is not subordinated to scientific theology. There is no guarantee in the end. Even a scientific theologian can't prove to you that this is absolutely the way it needs to be done. In the end, there's always the act of faith. There's always the Holy Spirit. And the only principle that Christ has given us is the pastoral ministry, pastoral and teaching ministry of Peter. He didn't give us 12 scientific theologians. Peter was not the intellectual among the apostles. The church has never been run by intellectuals. The intellectuals have always had a place in the church. The great fathers and doctors of the church. But it's not, and Benedict is an intellectual. But he's not the Pope because he's an intellectual. That's not what makes him Pope, because he's smarter than everybody else. That's not what makes him Pope. Yes? They do. I don't know, but they do.
Pope gave the Pope Pius X society and a bunch of points.
Yes, we're getting to that. All right. So that's April 2011. Then in 2011, Pope Benedict beatifies Pope John Paul II and quotes St. John Paul, Blessed John Paul, on the council, reaffirms the wisdom of the council, great Pope of the council, Blessed John Paul II. Let's skip that real quick. But what does the Society of St. Pius X say? Whereas St. Pius X wanted to restore all things in Jesus Christ, according to the original Greek, to recapitulate, to place Christ at the head, John Paul II only wanted to open things to Christ by simply proposing him to society, to culture, political and economical systems, and that in the name of a religious liberty paradoxically conceived as a dogma by an officially pastoral council. This was said in the context of saying that John Paul should not be beatified. All right, so these same movements, be careful with this, these same movements which are questioning the wisdom of the council are also questioning, but by the way, Gherardini does not believe that canonizations are infallible. He doesn't believe canonizations are infallible. Just because the Pope says somebody's in heaven by solemnly declaring it does not mean that's true.
Father, quickly, the difference between the Pope's pastoral duties as opposed to his teaching duties is one infallible while the other is not?
Yes, that's true. However, the prophetic, the office of prophecy throughout sacred history is the direction of human acts. That's, for example, charismatic graces of whatever kind. Are they infallible? It's true that a visionary can know that the vision is true. But in the end, there's no guarantee that a charismatic is really a charismatic grace unless the church says so. You understand what I'm saying? The pastoral ministry of the Pope to guide the church is a charismatic ministry. But only in the Pope does that charismatic ministry and the hierarchical ministry of teaching coincide. So there's nobody to judge whether or not the Pope's charism to guide the church is authentic, or whether in this instant he's right. There's no guarantee but Christ. He's the only guarantee. So to say that something is not infallible, is no excuse. In the end, the Pope, it's Christ who has entrusted the church to the Pope. It's not scientific theologians who have entrusted the church to the Pope, it's Christ. Yes. Yes.
You mentioned that there are on both sides of the political spectrum, you might say,
yes,
liberal, conservative,
yes,
that there's a belief in rupture.
Yes.
One predates the other, or are they born at the same time?
No, they were born at the same time. There were, for example, people on both sides, experts at the council who were disappointed. There were experts at the council who were very liberal, who were disappointed that they didn't get what they wanted. And there were very conservative elements at the council that were upset that they didn't get a formal condemnation of communism, for example. They're very conservative. I mean, there were liturgists on both sides of the aisle who were upset that they didn't get what they wanted. Yes?
Can you explain to me briefly the wisdom of compromise?
It's not compromise. No.
You said at the beginning.
Oh, no, it's not a wisdom. That's what the Holy Father said did not happen. The rupturists, those who hold that the council is a rupture with tradition, they hold that the council is a compromise. The Holy Father is saying the council is not a compromise. The council was taking the perennial teaching of the church and applying them to the modern world, which is specifically that's the competence, that's the office of the Holy Father. That's his job. That's his job. First him.
Some people on the very traditionalist side or extreme traditional side will say that blind obedience to the Holy Father is not virtuous.
Right, sure.
Not virtuous.
They'll say, pray and obey. They pray and obey, pray and obey. That's what Father Angelo is saying. Pray and obey. Don't do anything. Blind obedience? Yeah, I mean, if somebody is telling you to do something which is contrary to a right conscience, if they're telling you to do something which is contrary to the teaching of the church, sure. But he's the Pope. Who are you going to have recourse to? In the end, the problem with the rupturous position, whether or not it's liberal or conservative, whether or not it's modernist or traditionalist, is the same problem. Private judgment. Private judgment. In the end, the act of faith is a free and personal act saying yes to God. There's no guarantee in the end. There's no scientific guarantee that what you're professing is the truth. Otherwise, it wouldn't be faith. It's always going to be an act of faith. And in the end, if there's some argument between, is the council consistent with what Blessed Pope Pius IX taught about religious liberty, whose judgment in the end does it belong to? It belongs to the Pope. My point, though, especially with respect to the traditionalist position is, if you want to hold that, I guess, whatever. Whatever. But you can't tell me that is the Catholic position. That's your opinion. Anybody tells you Pope Benedict is wrong about the council, it is simply and absolutely unqualified their opinion and nothing more. Your opinion or the Pope's opinion. You say it's only his opinion. Okay, but it's your opinion or the Pope's opinion. You want to hold Garrigini's position? Go ahead. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. But it's just his opinion. But in the end, you say it's just the Pope's opinion. He's not a private person. It's not just the Pope's opinion. It's the Pope's teaching. You say only, whatever. It's still his teaching. You want to disagree with it? It's your business.
Will we have access to this timeline?
Yeah, I can get it to you. Let me go on very quickly because I want to finish. So yeah, this is a beatification. September 14th, 2011, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith delivers to the Society of St. Pius X a doctrinal preamble, which has never been published. Nobody's outside of a very small group of people have actually seen it. But on the same day, the congregation delivered a communique explaining what they had done. They met with Fidei, who's the head of the society, Archbishop Fidei, who's the head of the society, and they handed to him a doctrinal preamble. Basically it said, if you can agree to all these doctrinal principles, then we can regularize you. We can bring you, and there's some talk that maybe they get the status of Opus Dei, which is very unique status. It would give them a lot of independence. A lot of independence. Make them regular. They'd have good standing. All right? But they had to accept the doctrinal preamble. And the doctrinal preamble enunciates some of the doctrinal principles, the criteria of interpretation of Catholic doctrine necessary for ensuring fidelity to the magisterium of the Church and to the Centuricum Ecclesia, thinking with the Church, while leaving open to legitimate discussion and study and theological explanation of particular expressions and formulations present in the text of the Second Vatican Council and of the magisterium which followed it. The long and the short of it, you accept the hermeneutic of continuity, and you accept the authority of the magisterium to teach and to settle the issues. Then we can talk about phrases and texts in the conciliar document that you find difficult. If you accept the hermeneutic of continuity, if you accept the magisterium's ultimate right to decide the matter, you accept that, then we can talk. That's the doctrinal preamble. September 14th, watch this. September 14th, Feast of the Triumph of the Cross, 2011. 10 days later, so Bishop Fidei's response was tentative. Today, for the sake of objectivity, I must acknowledge that in the doctrinal preamble, there is no clear-cut distinction between the inviolable dogmatic sphere and the pastoral sphere that is subject to discussion. All right. So all these traditionalists are constantly making a distinction between infallible doctrine and fallible doctrine, between dogmatic teaching and pastoral teaching. That's their distinction. They think this is very important. Now, I'm not saying that that distinction is not important. Some things are infallible, some things are not infallible. Some things are dogmatic, some things are pastoral. That's a legitimate distinction. It's an important distinction. But note, if you follow this timeline, it's not a distinction that the Holy Father considers important in terms of interpreting the Council. Whenever the Holy Father talks about rightly interpreting the Council, he talks about not the distinction between pastoral and dogmatic, fallible and infallible. He talks about the hermeneutic of continuity and the hermeneutic of rupture. That's the distinction, and the only distinction that the Holy Father makes. All right? But it's not good enough for Fidei. 10 days later, September 24, 2011, Monsignor Gherardini republishes his letter. Republishes it. I think the first time he published it, it was only him that signed it. This time, there's 83 signatures on this letter. So 10 days after the Holy Father delivers the preamble to the Society of St. Pius X, Gherardini counters by republishing his letter, saying, what we need is this grand re-examination of the Council. All right? So, the challenge, here's the challenge. If it should, this is what he says, if it should happen that this continuity cannot be proved scientifically, as a whole or in part, it would be necessary to say so calmly and candidly in response to the demand for clarity that has been waited for almost half a century. Gherardini insists that the Pope must prove scientifically that the Second Vatican Council is in continuity with tradition. Brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, this idea is gaining currency in your circles. It's not just out there among the people. This is the idea that's being passed around on conservative blogs. A lot of people who are saying these things don't understand fully what they're saying. They don't follow through the implications. But the implications are serious.
The implications could also be in the issue of being against religious liberty. Some of them could be really
but more fundamental. If you say that the faith must be submitted to the scientific theology, you're finished. You don't have any faith anymore. October 11th, 2011, Pope Benedict calls for the year of faith. So Gardini's saying, we need this, all the theologians. He talks about having all the theologians who are particularly qualified. So he's basically saying that he wants to select the people, in other words. Those who are particularly qualified should be called. So he's very clear that he's not saying we should open this to everybody. We should open this to a select few that are qualified, all right? So he's definitely saying that the magisterium should be submitted to the examination of an intellectual elite, all right? The Holy Father's response is the year of faith. What does he see in the year of faith? What is the whole year of faith about? Get back to the text of the Council. Retranslate the text of the Council. Read the Council documents, especially the 4 pillars. De Verbum, the Constitution on Divine Revelation. Lumen Gentium, the dogmatic Constitution on the Church. Sacrosanctum Concilium, document on the liturgy, and the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the modern world, Gaudium et Spes. Especially those 4. And if that isn't enough, and it's not enough, to understand the Council correctly, go to the Catechism. You don't need scientific theologians. You need the Catechism. Council, Catechism, Pope. That's what the Holy Father is saying. October 11th. October 27th, 2011, the Holy Father goes to Assisi. The Society of St. Pius X puts their hands over the eyes and their ears. No, not Assisi again. Ecumenical disaster. Dialogue with all the pagan religions. What does the Holy Father say there? Holy Father says, read what he said. Talks about violence, godless violence and religious violence. He's reaffirming religious liberty. We're living in an age where you cannot coerce people to believe. It must be free and personal. It must come from your heart. You can't force people to believe. It's not the structures of society that's going to change people. It's you that are going to change people. You're going to change them. Nobody else can change them. Is the Holy Father calling for a crusade against Islam? No! What are you talking about? As romantic as that might be for those who aspire to chivalry, what are you talking about? These people killed babies. You can't solve the problem of Islam with a crusade. Read Regine Pernard. Regine Pernod. Medievalist. Dead now. French woman, medievalist. She's got a book published by Ignatius Press called Those Terrible Middle Ages, Debunking the Myths. She talks in there, she says, history does not provide answers. History provides the ability to pose the question properly. But she says, for example, the Crusades were a good idea in the beginning, but towards the end they were no longer the correct solution for Islam. That's why people like Blessed Raymond Lull, who was a crusader, he left the crusading life, he joined the friars, and he learned to speak Arabic. And he founded seminaries to teach missionaries how to speak the Eastern languages so that they could evangelize the Muslims. Because he knew that the sword would not convert them. It hasn't and it never will. Bishop Fidei on November 30th says, no, can't do it. They can't sign the preamble. Can't sign it. Sorry. he says, what does he say here? He drew a sharp distinction between the creed and the doctrinal preamble, saying that the council, which was pastoral, did not add any new articles to the faith, such as I believe in religious freedom, in ecumenism, or in collegiality. So they can't sign it. All right? Yep.
What's collegiality?
Means that the bishops or religious communities, when it's necessary to make a major decision, you try to do it collegially instead of singularly. And the balance is there is that the bishop is the ordinary of the diocese. Nobody else runs the diocese except for the individual bishop. But it is good for bishops to work together. It's simply better if the diocese have the same policies if they're, believing the faith. Problem is that sometimes collegiality is used as a hammer over the individual bishop. And the Society of St. Pius X does not like collegiality. So they wouldn't sign. Then January 6th, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith promulgates its note on pastoral recommendations, which is basically go back to the text of the council and read the Catechism. That's what the doctrinal note says. It provides all kinds of different concrete suggestions on how to get back to the council documents themselves and to the Catechism. Now, there's the timeline. Can't really see it, sorry. What happened there? Basically, you have the December 22nd conference of the Roman Curia, the Pope going this way, Summorum Pontificum going this way, the effort to continue the reform of the liturgy. Lifting of excommunication, the Pope going this way. Then Monsignor Gherardini goes this way, saying that there's no proof that the council's in continuity. And then even further, by bringing it out into the media, there's this big explosion of debate in Italy. Then the Holy Father beatifies John Paul II and talks about the council in the beatification homily this way. The doctrinal preamble this way, saying, we can talk about the council if you accept that it's in continuity. Then Gherardini again, republishing his letter. The Holy Father publishes Porta Fidei, reaffirming the council. Assisi talks against religious violence. SSPX rejects the preamble that way. And then the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith reaffirms the year of faith and says we have to go back to the council documents. There is no legitimacy to this opinion, in my opinion. And if people want to argue with me about it, I say, knock yourself out. But I'm not telling you anything that the Pope's not telling. It's not my opinion. It's not my opinion. The Pope will not budge on this issue. He is not budging. It's like in the face with the year of faith to the SSPX. Nicely, but in good old-fashioned Romanità. Good old-fashioned Roman, that's the Pope's politics. You don't like it? Here you go, year of faith. Huh? What?
Everything will be clarified.
It is clarified.
I know, but it has to be discussed because a lot of people don't think it is.
Well, that's why I'm doing this. But again, if these people accepted that the council does not have to be proven that it's part of tradition. The only way you can understand the Second Vatican Council is if you consider it part of tradition. You can't get to understanding the council by saying, prove to me that it's part of tradition. You're done, you're finished, you'll never be satisfied. The only way to understand the council is to consider it from the outset, because the Holy Father says it's true, that it is part of the Church's tradition. Period, amen, end of story. Yes?
To the timeline, I think you could add the letter to the Church in China, because it seems like with forefathers is one thing, but it's aimed at the Church in China, SSPX,
Yeah, you could, definitely. You could add the church, because again, the Holy Father, he's it's the same thing there. He very clearly says you have to accept the primacy of Peter, but I'll give you time. You can go by baby steps if you need to. So what he's saying is, I can't coerce you to do this, and I'm not going to try to, make life miserable in China, because of all the communists. But I can't lie to you. We can work with you. We can make certain concessions, but you have to see what the principles are and what the goal must be. So you're exactly right. It's exactly the same thing. I'll work with you. I'll lift the excommunication. I'll let you celebrate the old Mass. I'll even talk to you about what the council means. If you accept these fundamental principles, the fact of the matter is SSPX and those who sympathize with them do not accept these principles. They do not. And that's why I find this very, very dangerous. This sympathy for the society, this sympathy for this sort of, the council, there's something wrong with the council, is very, very dangerous. Yes?
Father, when Pope Benedict was in charge of Congregation and Doctrine of the Faith, when he came out with that letter, Domino Jesus, would you say this year and that year was like about on the same lines, like this is the way it is and that's it?
Yes. When I was in Australia, we had a movie night there. It was parish, and it was movie night, and they decided to show the election of Benedict XVI, which was a fiasco because Raymond de Susan and Father Richard Neuhaus couldn't figure out whether the smoke was white or black. It went on for like an hour trying to figure out. Anyway, after it was, after Pope was elected and they knew who it was and everything, Raymond Arroyo took advantage of the fact that he had the only English-speaking interview with Cardinal Ratzinger ever done on video. So he showed it, and it was done about a year before he was elected. So he's Cardinal Ratzinger, John Paul is still alive, and Raymond Arroyo is interviewing Cardinal Ratzinger, only a year before he's elected Pope. So at one point during the interview, Raymond Arroyo talks about the new springtime of the church that John Paul used to talk about. And John Paul was very effusive in his hope for the future. Well, Cardinal Ratzinger didn't speak, he had a slightly different take. I wouldn't say a contrary take, I'd say slightly different, complementary. But he said this very clearly, and this has been misinterpreted. Even the first time I heard it, I didn't understand. But this last time when I was in Australia and I heard this interview, it clicked for me. He said, there's not going to be busloads of conversions. He said, what's going to happen is it's going to be increasingly more critical that individual people, individual Catholics, have a deep conviction of their faith. And that this deep conviction is the new springtime. And this deep conviction is what's going to transform the society in which we live. He said, in the time of Constantine, he said, Cardinal Ratzinger said, the Christians were a very small minority. There were relatively few of them. But it was clear, he says, and I quote him almost exactly, it was clear that this is the future. This is the future. Not because there were big numbers, but because those Christians who lived at the time of Constantine were willing to die for their faith. That is what's going to change society. That is what is going to persuade others to believe. You're not going to coerce them to believe. You're going to persuade them by the way you believe and by the way you live. And the Holy Father maintains this. Absolutely, he will not budge from this point. What is going to change society is the individual faith of you, your individual faith, your personal convictions for which you're willing to live and to die. And he will not back down on the council. You have 50 years of papal teaching, unanimity. They don't pretend that things are rosy, but they will not say that the council was unwise. They will not say that the liturgical reform was wrong. None of them will. I don't know what else to tell you. Yes.
You know, sometimes you'll hear priests say, I've heard it both ways, so like, I'm confused. I've heard priests say to me, you know, the consecration to Russia or something hasn't been done. You'll hear other priests say it has been done. Is this tied in with these people?
Yes. It's all about why is the third secret of Fatima not fully revealed? Why? Why are they so convinced? Why? Because according to them, the third secret says that the council was going to be a big mistake and that they shouldn't call it. That's what they're hiding. That's what the Vatican is hiding. The Vatican really revealed the secret. You would know that the Second Vatican Council was a big mistake. All right? The problem with Father Gruner is not that all of his ideas are wrong. The problem is the same thing of the scientific theology. Father Gruner presents to you a whole bunch of information, the vast majority of which the vast majority of people can't make heads or tail of. And what is he telling you? He's saying, trust me. I know what really happened. I know the real deal. You have to trust me. And he talks about don't have blind Pharisaical obedience to the Pope. He says that all the time. But the vast majority of people who read the Fatima Crusader could never, on their own, verify the information that's being given them. It's human faith. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you believe Father Gruner, it's not divine faith, it's human faith. You take his word rather than the Pope's. So even if he were right, which I don't believe, the ultimate end is that you end up trusting him more than the nefarious cardinals in the Vatican. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't problems, and that sometimes you have to be discerning in who you believe, including bishops and cardinals. I'm not saying that. But if it becomes the Catholic habit of mind, it's your habit of mind in which you're constantly looking for the best guide, right? And it's going to be, say, Father Gruner or Michael Voris instead of the Pope. Well, you got a problem. Any way you scratch it, it's a problem. You might not feel comfortable believing the Pope because there's all kinds of questions that remain unanswered. But if you have more trust in Father Gruner than you have in Benedict, you have got a problem. You've got a problem. And there's no way out. No way out. Yeah.
We need scientific theologians.
Of course.
If not, why do we have...
No, they help us to understand the faith, and they help us to explain, and Pius IX used the arguments of Duns Scotus to define the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. So it's part of God's providence, there's no question about it. But the work of scientific theologians is never definitive.
So when you say scientific, it's still faith-based, right?
Of course, but Gherardini is the one who uses this word scientific.
Okay.
Father Peter Damian totally objects to the use of this word. Because it is not science in the modern sense of science. There's an argument, it goes on forever about what science is, the definition of science. Philosophers, theologians, and empirical scientists will all argue to the end of the world about what science is. But it's not scientific in the sense that you can purely on the level of reason prove it to be true. You can't. Yes?
One of the conservative blogs said that Blessed John XXIII on his deathbed said to stop the council, and he did not want it to go forward. I didn't know what your thought was on that, and if that was true, would they then act in disobedience by continuing?
Oh my God. This is purely anecdotal. You know what I mean? Even if he said that, which this is, I don't think anybody, when you give me anecdotes like that, I just go, get rid of it. What's the point of it? But even if he says it, it has no value doctrinally. None. No superior can simply say something on their deathbed, and and I see this happen. I see it happen in religious life. I see it happen in church. Someone says, so-and-so said this, and you have to start doing this right now because he's in charge and he said this. What? That's not the way the church works. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't become a matter of the public good and public record and law unless it's a papal act. The church doesn't work this way. And that right there, and I see people do it on whatever side, but right there, that's a problem for me. You start telling me stuff like that, bing, red flag.